And I'll hand it over to you, Mr. Hildebrand.
Good morning. Welcome to this Canmore Local Assessment Review Board hearing. I would like to remind everyone that the ARB hearings are open to the public, and this hearing will be recorded and live streamed. The video recording will be the record of the hearing. We're here today to review the complaint and subsequent evidence filed for Tax Roll 10973, municipal address number 4837 5th Street in Canmore. I will start by introducing the panel and then ask the parties to introduce themselves. After that, I will explain our standard hearing procedure and ask for comments in that regard. My name is Dale Hildebrand. I'm the presiding officer appointed to this panel. The other panel members with me here today, on my right, Karen Mara, and on my left, Martin Buckley. Does anyone have any objections to the panel as constituted? Thank you. I'm now going to ask the parties to introduce themselves, starting with the respondent. Please go ahead.
Okay, I am Christopher Snellgrove with Benchmark Assessment. Hi there, I'm Christopher Snellgrove. I'm one of the assessors for Benchmark Assessment. We provide assessment services to the town of Canmore.
Thank you. The complainant has elected not to appear before us today. In terms of our standard practice, usually we would have the complainant present their evidence first. Since they're not here, we will move on to the respondent to present their evidence, followed by any questions from the panel. And then we'll simply move straight to argument. Okay. Any questions on our procedure today? A little bit different, thank you. Any preliminary issues?
Yes. Okay, thank you. The preliminary issues basically are the complainant has not met the onus of Section 460-9 of the Municipal Government Act to demonstrate how the assessment is incorrect. The complainant has the complainant met the evidentiary burden of proof under 460 Section 9 of the MGA and demonstrated how the assessment of $701,000 is incorrect. There is a typo. I don't know if you have the preliminary issues in front of you there. There is a typo there where it suggests on item number 2 under issues, I'm not sure your exact page numbers, but it says $914,000, but the assessed value is $701,000.
Okay.
So the question is, should this actually be dismissed under subsection 467-2 for noncompliance for presenting no evidence? Okay, so if you can turn to page 5 of that document, the complainant had a duty to disclose documentary evidence in any written argument by August 22nd. The notice of hearing was sent August 3rd and outlined the disclosure responsibilities. The complainant was required to provide disclosure to the Assessment Review Board clerk and us, Benchmark Assessment. The complainant failed to provide any evidence or argument on or before the required dates to either party. All that was provided was in the complaint. They just mentioned a few parcels had been selling less on a few streets, but not specific property addresses or sale prices relative to those properties. So the matters relating to assessment complaints regulation is clear that the board must not hear any evidence not disclosed within the legislated timelines. There's several decisions here following that we can go through supporting this. The first one there, a local assessment review board panel must not hear any evidence that has not been disclosed in accordance with Section 5. And then the Alberta Court of Queen's Bench and Assessment Review Boards have held that late evidence is inadmissible. And the whole point of all these rules is to standardize this process so people can be, treated fairly and we can respond properly, and then you, as a board, can make a decision based on something. So, yeah, in this first decision there, Canada Safeway versus the City of Calgary, a judge spoke to non-disclosure of evidence. These are basic procedural fairness rules that specify disclosure obligations and the rules regarding the use of evidence in the event of non-disclosure. They're intended to ensure that the parties to the appeal have adequate notice of the case to be met and an opportunity to respond or rebut evidence presented by the opposite party. The provisions of the MRAC are clear. The board must not hear any evidence that has not been disclosed.
Can I just maybe ask you to clarify? So we've asked for this preliminary issue. So the preliminary issues you're asking is not to hear any evidence that is properly disclosed?
That's correct.
Okay, but we don't really have any evidence before us from the complainant. So what exactly are you asking us to consider as a preliminary issue?
Well, the fact that there is no evidence, as you stated, it really shouldn't be heard past this point, ultimately.
Okay.
So that's the preliminary issue.
Okay. So I don't really think there's anything for us to rule on. There's no evidence to consider. So maybe we could just move straight to you presenting your evidence as a respondent, and we'll consider that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So you have a copy of our respondent disclosure there. I'm not sure which page it starts on in the layout there, but would you know, Megan?
Perhaps we'd like to just label the evidence to help clarify.
Sure.
Please go ahead, thank you.
So in this hearing, we have three pieces or three packages of evidence. The complainant package, which is just the initial complaint form that was submitted. So one page, that has been labeled as C1. And then we have two packages from the respondent. We have the preliminary issue package, which is 42 pages. That has been labeled as R1. And then we have the respondent disclosure package of 64 pages, and that is R2. So at this point, the respondent has requested that we no longer hear any evidence based on the preliminary issue of that the complainant has not met the onus of submitting evidence.
That's correct.
Please go ahead and present your case.
Okay, so page 3 of item C2, which is the respondent disclosure, it just continues on with the issue of not providing anything to respond to. So they have not met the onus of providing evidence that the assessment is incorrect, and nor have they provided evidence of what the new number should be for you to consider. So it's not much to discuss there. But let's see, on page 4, this reviews items, situations where the onus is upon the appellant to say that sort of information so that we can respond to it. And then there's some decisions there. The second one down, the complainant bears the onus of demonstrating what information shown is incorrect, explaining how it's incorrect, and what the correct information should be, identifying what the assessed value the complainant requests. Okay. Following that one, the onus of proving that an assessment is incorrect lies with the individual alleging it from that decision. The third one there, the onus is on the complainant to prove the assessment is incorrect. The onus of proving that an assessment is incorrect lies with the individual alleging it. I think we could review the subject property here a bit. On page 10 of that, you see a picture of the subject property. And the second page, following 2 pages, are aerial location maps showing where they are situated. It looks pretty close to the river there. On page 12. And then page 13 goes through some of the details of the property. The sale price in September 2018 is $625, and it's interesting to note she's requesting an assessed value less than what she paid in 2018. I don't know if you could see that, but that's near the bottom, just below the assessment on page 13. Sale price $625, and the transfer documents are in the back of this document as well. Okay, well, page 9, the summary of testimonial evidence. I think it's clear that they have not provided anything, but the onus is on the complainant to demonstrate the assessment is incorrect. The valuation standard for the subject property is market value, and the assessor must prepare assessments in a fair and equitable manner. I think if we could jump to page 23 real quick. This is kind of the most compelling, I think, evidence that we have to present. The market modified cost approach was utilized in the preparation of residential assessments for 2022. Sales from July 1st, 2019 to June 30th of 2022 were analyzed and used in the preparation of the assessments. Below are the sales of comparable homes in the same neighborhood as the subject property. You can see the comparables there in this chart. The very first one is the subject property, and then following are 3 sales, which are highlighted in blue in the map below. You can see all the lot areas in the 4th column there are all exactly the same as the subject property. The second comparable is the closest in age, but a bit smaller on a square foot basis, and its sale price was adjusted to $651.9. The second comparable, built in 1992, a little closer to the subject in size, sold for $841,700. The third comparable there, the strongest for size of both land and building size, although 10 years newer, sold for $998,400. So the question is, is the assessment 701 a reasonable valuation for this property in light of these very comparable properties, which are very close in proximity as well? I think we can move on to the summary on page 24. In light that the appellant has not provided any evidence to support their assessment should be lower than this, They have provided nothing to suggest that this assessment is incorrect, nothing solid or substantial. The burden of proof has not been met by the complainant, and there's no basis for the board to reduce the assessment. The assessor feels that the comparable sales provided to the board support the assessed value, and respectfully submits that the property assessments for the subject property is both correct and equitable with other properties in the town of Canmore, and ask that the review board confirm the assessment at $701,000.
Great, thank you very much for your submissions. I will take your evidence and your submissions also as your argument summation. So I thank you for your cooperation and your helpful presentation. This time I'd like to ask if you feel that you've been heard today and feel if you received a fair hearing.
I think so.
Thank you. I will now declare the hearing closed. No further evidence or submissions may be received by the board. The Municipal Government Act requires a written decision within 30 days and gives the clerk an additional 7 days to issue the decision. We will make every effort to meet or beat those requirements, and the clerk will forward our decision at our earliest convenience. And with that, I would propose we close this hearing. All right, thank you. Good morning and welcome to the Canmore Local Assessment Review Board hearing. I would like to remind everyone that the ARB hearings are open to the public and that this hearing will be recorded and live streamed. The video recording will be our record of this second hearing. We are here today to review the complaint and subsequent evidence filed for tax roll 10546, municipal address 633 2nd Street in Canmore. I will start by introducing the panel and ask the parties to introduce themselves. After that, I will explain our standard hearing procedure and ask for comments in that regard. My name is Dale Hildebrand, and I am the proceeding officer appointed to this panel. The other panels with me today are on my right, Karen Mara, and on my left, Martin Buckley. Does anyone have any objections to the panel as constituted? Complainant, are you there?
Hi, Ms. Blazo, are you in attendance?
Yeah, I'm live. Can you hear me? Hello?
Oh, that looks promising. We can see you.
Can you hear me though?
Oh, can't hear you though. It does say you are unmuted.
Yeah. I can sign on my iPad and see if that works better, okay?
Sorry, we still can't hear you.
I'll try my
Would you like to log out and try coming back in? Okay.
Yes. Hello? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Okay. Sorry, Ms. Blazo, can you try speaking again? Can you hear us? Are you able to hear us? Hmm.
Hello, can you hear me? Mm, Okay, I need to understand why they can't hear me before they could actually see me. Can you hear me? Mm. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Hello? Um, I don't know what to do. Ah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can't see you. Is your video on?
It was. Let's see. Yeah, there you
Oh,
go.
hooray! Thank you
Video
very much.
on.
All right, don't know what,
Can you turn on your video?
yeah, let's see here.
Thank you.
Okay. Can you see us now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, you can see us, you can hear us.
Life is.
All right, perhaps we would like to just start over from the top.
Good morning, Ms. Bazo. Were you able to hear our introductions earlier?
No, it's okay. You could skip them. I read the agenda, so I know who's there, I think.
Okay, I'll just start by introducing us again. My name is Dale Hildebrand. I'm the presiding officer appointed to this panel. On my right is Karen Mara, and on my left is Martin Buckley. Do you have any objections to the panel as constituted?
No,
And respondent, I believe, said no.
that's
Thank
right.
you.
No.
I'm now going to ask the parties to introduce themselves, starting the complainant. Would you please state your name for the record and confirm that you are the owner of the property under this complaint, as which I said earlier was 633 2nd Street in Canmore?
Absolutely. My name is Adrian Bellagio. I live at 633 2th Street in Canmore. What else did you ask me to say?
Oh, that's great. Thank you
That's
very
it, right?
much. And now the respondents, would you please state your name for the record, organization, and position with the municipality?
Hi there, I'm Christopher Snellgrove with Benchmark Assessment. We provide assessment services for the town of Canmore.
Thank you very much. The LARB standard practice is to have the complainant present all of their evidence first, followed by questions from the respondent and then the panel. Next, the respondent presents their evidence, followed again by questions from the complainant and then the panel. The complainant will have the opportunity for rebuttal. Finally, both parties will have an opportunity to present their final arguments and summarize their evidence for the panel, with the complainant presenting first. If anyone needs a break or if problems come up, please let us know as soon as possible and we can address things as we go. I would like to take this time to remind everyone to please turn off their mobile devices. Are there any questions regarding the proceeding today, and is everybody satisfied with the process as I have laid it out? Ms. Blazo?
Yes,
Thank you.
satisfied.
Thank you. I see both parties have exchanged disclosure evidence before the hearing. To save time, I propose that we mark all documents for the record now. That won't stop anyone from raising questions about admissibility later. If such questions arise, we can still deal with them and strike material from the record later if necessary. Is everybody comfortable with this procedure? Ms. Blazo?
Yes.
Thank you. Clerk, if you'd be so kind to read the evidence and mark it for us.
Yes, so for this hearing, we have 3 packages. We have the complaint form, the original complaint form, which included 4 pages, and that will be the complainant disclosure C1. We have the respondent's disclosure that was 85 pages, and that will be respondent disclosure R1. And then we have the complainant's rebuttal evidence, which is 1 page, and that will be the complainant disclosure C2.
Great, thank you very much. Ms. Blazo, we are ready to hear your evidence. Please proceed.
Is it possible just to rely on the written evidence? I really don't have much more to add. So if you guys have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. But what I provided is essentially my complaint.
All right, and I assume you were referring primarily to Exhibit C2. You provided in a tabular format.
Yes, exactly.
Various sales and some evidence there, assessments, price per square foot, and that's the evidence you're asking us to rely on?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Does the board have any questions on that evidence?
No, I don't have any questions of the complainant.
I don't either, thank you.
Thank you. Respondent, would you like to proceed and summarize your evidence for us?
All right, thank you. So technically, reviewing the complaint provided by Ms. Blaza there is nothing really disclosed to convince that the assessment was incorrect, nor something to prove that another value should be used in light of that. It was not disclosed prior to the correct date, so technically that actually should not be heard either, similar to the last issue that we heard. But we'll proceed past that and address some of these other issues here. On page 4 of the complainant rebuttal, near the bottom, just after there's 4 decisions there, is an increase in assessment from the previous year reason enough to demonstrate that an assessment is incorrect. This issue has been before several different boards as well. The first kind of example there at the bottom, while a 26.2 annual increase in assessment is significant by itself, it does not mean that the property is necessarily incorrectly assessed. And following that on page 5, there's some examples of other boards dismissing complaints where the complainant has failed to disclose any documentary evidence for that burden of proof that they have to provide something for you to review to prove that the assessment is incorrect. So I probably won't rehash all of those right now, but on page 6, it goes, if you look at the paragraph in the middle there, after some decisions, the complainant has a multi-step requirement to demonstrate how a change should be necessary. First, the complainant must show that the assessment is incorrect, and second, convincingly prove that the requested value is correct. And in the absence of both, boards have decided in the past to change that a change would be unwarranted. The complaint did address a few properties, but these properties were not actual sales. At the very close to the end, those 3 properties are outlined. Their assessment details are anyway on page 73 of the complaint disclosure. These are those.
Sorry, if I just interrupt you.
Yeah.
Page 73 of Exhibit R1.
Yes, that's correct. These are the 3 that she did bring up in her complaint note there at the beginning and in the rebuttal. You'll note that each of these 3 buildings are different styles of building. The first one on page 73 is a 2-story basementless property. The second one is a 3-story basementless property, and the third one is a 3-story basementless property. None of these were actual sales within this analysis period. Therefore, they were not used to create the assessment for Ms. Blazo's property. A few pages before that, this is on page 71, you'll see the MLS listing for the subject property, kind of highlights some of the details of it. And then there's some snapshots of the interiors of the building, just for reference sake, so you can have an idea of the nature of this home. A few other things I'd like to review here. Some more details about the subject property itself. If you turn to page 10 of this document, sorry I'm jumping around a bit, but I think this is pretty pertinent direction here. So there's a photograph of the subject property as we have it in our system. The following page shows where it is situated in its neighborhood there. It's highlighted in red on page 11. And then page 12 shows the aerial imagery of the property. The following page shows some of the details of the property, how it's assessed. As well as its zoning and the sale price in 2020 for $1.64 million. And that adjusted sale price for inflation at $2,025,700, just below that. So some background here on page 14. Property assessments for the town of Canmore are prepared in accordance with the requirements of the MGA, Municipal Government Act, and the matters relating to assessment and taxation regulation, hereafter referred to as MRAT. The MRAT regulation establishes the valuation standard to be used, defines the procedures to be applied, and defines objectives for the quality to be achieved in the preparation of assessments. The legislation requires the municipality to prepare assessments that represent market value by application of the mass appraisal process. All assessments are expected to meet quality standards prescribed by the province in the MRAT regulation. Market value. Assessment, or Alberta legislation prescribes that the property assessments must be prepared based on market value. Market value means the amount that a property might be expected to realize if it is sold on the open market by a willing seller to a willing buyer. Property assessments for the 2022 assessment year must be an estimate of the value of the property as of July 1st, 2022, that's our valuation date, and the condition date of December 31st. So that means if the house burns down prior to December 31st, the assessment will reflect the condition of that property as burned down for the end of that year. But the valuation date is as of July 1st. That's what we're That's the valuation need that we're placing this value as of. So all the sales preceding that were 3 years up until June 30th, the day before. Okay, so how we do that, mass appraisal follows. Mass appraisal is the legislated methodology used for valuing individual properties. It involves the following process. Properties are stratified into groups of comparable properties. So what that means is we group properties. We're going to compare two-story basementless homes to two-story basementless homes, not to a bi-level or a bungalow or a three-story with a basement, and so forth. This is to compare apples to apples, so to speak. Common property characteristics are identified for the properties in each group, and a uniform valuation model is created for each property group. The International Association of Assessing Officers distinguishes between mass appraisal and single property appraisals. Single property appraisal is the valuation of a particular property as of a given date. Mass appraisal is the valuation of many properties as of a given date, using standard procedures and statistical testing. Also, mass appraisal requires standardized procedures across many properties. Thus, valuation models developed for mass appraisal purposes must represent supply and demand patterns for the group of properties rather than a single property. The point of this is to create a fair measuring stick that we can apply taxation. As opposed to if you were to hire an appraiser to value your home, he's going to give you an estimate of that property within a certain range. It's the same idea, but we're doing it more globally so that there's a common measuring stick to tax people. The interest that's being valued is fee simple. There's several different interests around, but the one that we have to base these values on is absolute ownership. Fee simple interest is absolute ownership, unencumbered by any other interest or estate. And it goes through some of the other types of interest there for reference. Also, another principle is the highest and best use. A principle of appraisal and assessment requiring that each property appraised as though it were being put to the most profitable use, given probable legal, physical, financial constraints. Okay. The following page, page 16, reviews the approaches to value that we use in creating our assessments. There's the first one, direct comparison approach, the typical market value is determined by referencing comparable sales and other market data. It's often used when there's sufficient sales or market data available, and it may be also referred to as a sales comparison approach. Then there's the cost approach that is used. Typical market value is calculated by adding the depreciated replacement cost of the improvements to the estimated value of land. It is often used for properties under construction or where there is limited market data available. It's nice in a farm situation where a barn doesn't sell very often, but you need to put a value on it. So these come from a cost manual, usually used to be provided by the province, but now we rely on one from Marshall and Swift out of California. The modified market cost approach. Market modified cost approach is a hybrid of both the cost and sales comparison approaches to value. Under this approach, all improvements are first value based on the cost approach, and then the values are adjusted to reflect current market conditions based on sale transactions. This is the most appropriate method of valuation because it mirrors the actions of buyers and sellers in the marketplace, and there is sufficient sales data to derive reliable market estimates. It's probably the most common valuation method used for assessment purposes in Alberta. The cost manual says a building might cost $100,000, and as they start to sell, you can see they're about 20% higher than that, so the value becomes $120,000. That's simplifying quite a bit there, but that's the basis of how we prepare these values. Then there's the income approach. Income approach considers the typical actions of renters, buyers, and sellers when purchasing income-producing properties. So not really applicable right now, but it's there for information anyway. So residential detached properties in the town of Canmore are primarily valued using the market modified cost approach to value. So the valuation process, the very bottom paragraph there, sales information received from land title's office and the sales are validated. Validation may include site inspections, interviews with involved parties, a review of the land title documents, corporate searches, third-party information like MLS listings or sales. The resulting validated sales are used to develop valuation models to replicate market behavior. So the sale price reflects the condition of the property on the sale date. It may not be equal to the assessed value. So as mentioned, for the 2022 year, the valuation of residential property sales occurring from July 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2022 were analyzed. Then there is something that comes into play called the effective year built. The effective year built is the age of a house adjusted for additions or renovations to the house. So it becomes a blended number from the original year built, and if you replace the roof, you might expect another 10 to 20 years of life out of that building. So we try to take that into consideration. So the following page, page 18, the market modified cost approach is used in the preparation of residential property assessments. This is applied to the subject property for the 2022 assessment roll to produce the value of $1,920,000. The calculation of the 2022 assessment year is demonstrated below. So breaks down the details of the home. You can see under improvements, this house was built in 1996. We're considering it to be an effective age of 2001, given the level of renovations or repairs that have been done to the building. It's considered a two-story basementless home, and that's what we would have been comparing it to, is other two-story basementless homes that sold in Canmore for this
Okay.
period.
Can I just get the page reference for that last?
Yep, sorry, this is page 18.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
All right. So the square footage that we have assessed, 2,076 over the 2 floors. Then you can see there's a kitchen sink, a half bath, full bath shower, basin, full bath, metal built-in fireplace, and a cathedral ceiling area with a garage attached to the home built in 1996 as well. So those are the physical details that would affect this value. The site size is 6,591 square feet. Okay. So the following page again goes over the burden of proof or the onus of the parties to provide some sale evidence or market evidence suggesting that these values should be different than we are saying they are. I think we can move ahead there a bit to page 22 to summarize that whole section. The very bottom paragraph, the complainant has not provided any evidence regarding the prior complaint hearing other than to indicate that the assessor should be bound by the comparables cited in the decision. So it's talking about the previous board decision where from the 2021 year. It's noteworthy to mention that the 3 properties listed as comparables did not sell recently, and these are the ones that she'd mentioned in her complaint based on the previous board decision. They were not used in the preparation of the 2022 property assessments. Also of note, the property classifications on the property at 613 and 617 Street changed from last year as a result of the complaint process from the previous year, because from 2-story with basements to 3-story no basement properties. And the subject is classified as a 2-story basement property. So from that previous decision, there was some confusion because the properties were not the same types of home. And the decision was kind of based on that. So it's important to note that for this valuation period, we kind of learned from this and reassigned some of those properties as 2-story basementless and so forth. So let's see here. On page 25, we can see the comparable sales that we are considering to provide this assessed value.
Sorry, page 24?
25, yeah. Okay, so these are the comparable sales we have to refer to. Below are sales of two-story no-basement homes in the same neighborhood as the subject property. In fact, they're all on the same street, and they're highlighted below with the subject highlighted in red and the other two in green. The strongest, most compelling indication of value we have for this property is Ms. Blazo's own purchase price, which is, it is considered a comparable sale in this analysis, as it is exactly the type of building we're valuing. So the adjusted sale price, you can see at the far end there, the adjusted sale price would be $2,025,700. The following two comparables on the same street have very similar lot areas. The lot sizes are almost identical, so that should be very, very similar. And the year builds vary somewhat, and the square footages vary somewhat. So we have a range of 2,076 to 2,662. But if you look at the adjusted sale prices, they're pretty narrow range, $2,025,700 to maximum of $2,195,400. So these are extremely strong comparable sales to the subject property on the same street in the same neighborhood. The same classification of home. So the differences might be, some might have slightly larger or more bathrooms or less bathrooms, more basement development. That sort of thing might be slightly different. Well, they're basementless, so there wouldn't be basement development, but that sort of thing would be different amongst them. But I think that it's clear that on the following page is our summary, but the position is that there has been no sales evidence, no market data suggesting that this assessed value, 1.9 million, is incorrect, that it's high or low. She's not said, what she's basing it on was the decision previously, which were comparing assessments, not sales, and there's no sale market evidence suggesting that this is a high or low number, other than what we've provided here. The burden of proof has not been met by the complainant, and therefore there's no basis for the board to reduce the assessment. With regards to the complaint hearing from last year, the complainant has not provided any evidence regarding the prior complaint hearing other than to indicate that the assessor should be bound by the comparables cited in the decision. As it has been demonstrated, the legislative framework requires that the assessment be prepared on an annual basis. Every year we have to come up with a new number. This is legislated. We have new evidence every year as well of new sales. And over this last period, there's been about a 22% inflation happen to the sale homes that have sold here in Canmore. So we have to reflect that, and that's why we rely on these adjusted sale prices. They're adjusted to reflect that inflation over that time. So every year we have to come up with a new number. Even if a board did make a decision last year, that was for that year. Now we have to move on and create a new number this year because we have new information. As it has been demonstrated, legislative framework requires that the assessment be prepared on an annual basis. Prior board decisions do not have an impact on the current assessment, especially in the case where the comparable cited did not sell, and two of the three are a different type of property than the subject. The assessor feels that the comparable sales provided to the board by the respondent support the assessed value and respectfully submits that the property assessment for the subject property is both correct and equitable with other properties in the town of Canmore, and asks that the assessment review board confirm the assessment at $1,920,000. That's it.
Great, thank you very much. Maybe I'll get you just to stay with us for a minute here, and I suspect you may have some board questions. Karen, want to start with you this time?
I have no questions at this time, thank you.
Martin?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hildebrand. Mr. Snellgrove, I'm going to reference you back to page 16 of your respondent disclosure, the approaches to value.
Okay.
And as well, I'm going to tie that in with page 24 of the respondent disclosure R1.
Okay.
So the first is R2 and the second is R1. So on page 16, your approaches to value,
Yeah.
good explanation there. Thank you very much for that.
Okay.
The paragraph just above the second heading. So it says valuation process for assessing residential properties.
Yep.
The paragraph right above that says the residential detached properties in the town of Canmore are primarily valued using the market modified cost to approach. And I'm keying on the words are primarily valued.
Yes.
Below that valuation process for assessing residential properties, the next paragraph down, property value assessments for residential properties in the town of Canmore are determined using the market modified cost approach. So on the one you say primarily valued, the second one you say are. So I take it the four approaches you have on page 16, they are used throughout the town in different circumstances. Obviously the cost approach if the house is under construction, I understand that.
Yep.
Yeah. But I guess the question is the approach you used on this property, the market modified cost approach, is the right one to use?
Yes. In this
Okay.
case, and that is exactly what we're using in this case.
Okay.
We often refer to all of these approaches to come up with a final valuation, but in this case, this is the primary method that we're relying on to arrive at this value.
Okay. So jumping ahead to that second reference I made, the disclosure package, page 24 of R1, and you listed the 3 properties. I gather that wasn't a sufficient size to stick with the direct comparison approach.
The direct comparison approach is not really used in this situation. This is the market modified cost approach. So all these values come from an Alberta cost manual initially. And as they sell, like for example, a 2-story basementless home like we're discussing, we have a rate per square foot from the Province of Alberta Assessor Manual. Okay, that's our starting point. And then each year as they sell, we can see, the median value of all the sales suggests this is high or low. And so for that type of property, that type of building specifically, we can raise or lower our assessed values to match within 5% of the middle of all the sale indications. Is that what you're asking?
Well, yeah, I'm trying to establish that, I hesitate to use the words beyond the shadow of a doubt, that the market modified cost approach you used was the appropriate one. Going back to page 16, direct comparison approach, determined by referencing comparable sales and other market data is often used when sufficient sales or market data is available. And then going back to page 24, you list 3 properties. And what I'm trying to say is the reason the direct comparison approach wasn't used was because the relative sample was not large enough or something.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's the answer I was
We
looking
need
for.
much
Yes.
larger sample size to really utilize that.
Okay,
And
thank you.
properties have very similar, there's,
That's what I need to know.
okay,
Thank you very much, sir.
you bet.
No more questions, Mr. Hildebrand.
Thank you. I just have a couple questions, and maybe I'll start with Exhibit C2, where the complaint has outlined some properties, and they all have a 2023 land assessment of $1,550,000. Did you look at those, and do those appear to be correct for the land assessment?
I have not personally compared to verify this, but I believe we provided her the information, and
Okay.
so I would say that it is correct.
Okay. And the house assessment at 870, assume that's correct, so come up with a dollars per square foot of 420. So if we go to your respondent package back to page 24, and we're looking at these other sales, I just kind of doing some mental math here, so please bear with me.
Sure.
And we'll just kind of do some round numbers, if you will. So at a sale price of $2,025,000, I assume then we're going to end up with a market value for the home of somewhere greater than 420. Let's maybe call it 430 or 440 or whatever the number is. And then if I look at the next two sales, and just looking at the incremental increase in size and the incremental increase in sale price, it feels like on an incremental basis, it's about $300 a square foot. And so my question to you, going back to that assessor model, do you always make the assumption that the value of the home is linear, like the first square foot is the same value as the last square foot? Or do you look at it and say a home is worth X, and then if it's bigger, it may be worth more per square foot?
That is an excellent question. It is addressed in the report here. What you're talking about is what we call economies of scale, or the law of diminishing returns. You pay a certain amount for the first amount, but as the size increases, the price per unit decreases. I forget the exact page here, but that is in our disclosure. I can find it if you like. But yeah, that is the oldest of the three sales as well. So it's been adjusted the most for time, you know, like to reflect the inflationary growth during that 3-year cycle. It would be at the beginning of the cycle. So, you know, that might be interesting to note as well. But yeah, that's the economies of scale question is exactly right.
Okay, great. Thank you for explaining that to me.
You bet.
All right, I believe that completes the board's questions on the respondent's evidence. Ms. Blazo, I'd like to turn it back to you. Do you have any rebuttal evidence that you'd like to present?
A couple of questions for Benchmark. What market factor are you utilizing for my home as per your process?
I don't have that information in front of me.
I can answer if I may.
Okay.
You're utilizing 240%. So from what you've told me is you've looked at the sales and you believe, because of the market, and I totally get it, 240% is the right number, and 200% was the right number last year. And I don't dispute that. Do you know what market value you're using for 3-story homes?
No, I do not.
That's 3-story custom homes, you're utilizing 200%. And so my question to you is, what is the data that you have that says the market value, because is different between 3 stories and 2 stories. For something that big of a gap, you must have some data.
Yes, we probably do. But I don't have that here. It's not part of the package.
Yeah, and that's sort of what I was asking in my original complaint, is I don't understand the results that your model is giving. And so one of the reasons happens to be that. Also, one more question. What market value adjustments are you using for my neighbor's home? Which is it's a custom, what do you call it? Luxury custom home, 3 stories. What would you be using in your model for a luxury 3-story home?
I'm not aware.
The answer is 290%. These types of factors impact directly the assessments, and I'm not seeing how it's fair and equitable across different types. So if you could address that to myself and the board and convince me that it makes sense, I'm happy to hear it, but I don't see it.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, so I was mentioning comparing apples to apples. Your neighbor, if they have a 3-story custom home, then we would be looking at sales of 3-story custom homes. And so that's why the market adjustment factor would be different for that style of property. Yours is a 2-story basementless home. And that's the only type of property we've really addressed in this situation, because we need market evidence to compare your house to other sales, not so much to another 3-story or a 1.5-story. Does that make
So,
sense?
so I understand. So you're saying 3 stories are less valuable because they have a market adjustment of 200% if they're custom, but they're 100% more, 50% more valuable if they're a custom luxury?
Remember, sorry to interrupt you there, but remember I was saying this is a modified cost approach. So we'd start, a starting point for a 3-story home custom would have a different rate per square foot to start with. And so when you start from that point, then as that type of home sells, it could be at different rates than a 2-story basementless, or a 1-story basementless. They all sell differently in the marketplace. And whatever that is, whether it's high or low for each grouping of home, it's not going to be the same market adjustment factor applied to every style of home, because not every home is exactly the same. If we had, like our bi-levels and bungalows, they would sell at different rates than the 2-story basementlesses would. Or they might be the same, in which case we would measure it that way, but the property in question is a 2-story basementless. And does that explain?
Well, it explains. It doesn't show the board or myself the backup for those market adjustments. And only then can I say that it's fair and equitable across all building types. So I guess that's my question. And I'd like just to highlight the fact that a 3-story home has a 200% market adjustment. Mine has a 240, but the other 3-story beside me, which is luxury, is 290%. If there was some compelling factor between 3 stories and 2 stories, it would be reflected in both of those properties. And the cost to build the units would be reflected in the guidelines, or the 2001 Alberta guidelines for how to cost these properties. So I'm, again, not seeing a logical response.
All right, do you have any other questions?
Not really, no.
Okay, any questions from the board on the complaint and rebuttal evidence? Mr. Buckley, I'll go back to you.
No questions. Thank you, sir.
No questions, thank you.
I just have one. I'd like to take you to Exhibit C2, Ms. Blazo, and the last paragraph there on your memo here, or your email, I'm not sure. I'm just going to read it here. Additionally, in understanding my evaluation, I've developed a theory on how the assessed methodology is inequitable for all 1- and 2-story properties relative to 3-story properties. I will provide this to the board under a separate cover, as the cause of the inequities is not relevant to the board's evaluation of the fairness of my 2023 assessment. So have you provided that under separate cover?
No, I haven't. As I said, it's not relevant. I've written it up, but I just wanted to focus on, is the assessment of my property fair relative to my neighbors? I mean, they're 2 doors down from me, and they have an extra 1,000 square feet in their home. It's newer, and their valuation is $20,000 less. I mean, it's just so blatantly off. I just don't want to muddy the waters with how they got there. I know how they got there, but it's really about, is this fair across my street?
Okay, and just to be clear then, you're speaking of 617 Second Street with its evaluation of 1.9 million,
Yeah.
101,000, and you're comparing that to your own assessment.
Exactly.
That's your point?
That's my point.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate you responding to my questions. I'd now like to move on to argument summation and provide each of you the opportunity for any additional summation that you may like. And I'll start with you, Ms. Blazo. Do you have anything further you'd like to put forward to the board?
No, I think that's sufficient.
Thank you. And respondent?
I think the main point I would like to bring up lastly is just we are trying to compare apples to apples in an effort to be fair and equitable. We're not comparing Ms. Blazo to the 3-story properties down the street. Her valuation comes from 2-story basementless sales only. And that is an effort to be as fair and equitable as possible.
Thank you. And last word to you, Ms. Blazo, anything further?
I think that the requirement under the legislation is to ensure that the assessments are fair and equitable across all types of properties. And so the questions that I've put forward, I think, are valid and need to be addressed.
Great. Thank you for those submissions. So thank you, everyone, for your cooperation and your helpful presentations. We appreciate the good dialogue. At this time, I would ask the parties if they feel they've been heard today and if they feel they have received a fair hearing. Ms. Blazo, do you feel that you've been heard today?
Yes, thank you.
And the respondent? Thank you for that. I now declare the hearing closed. No further evidence or submissions may be received by the board. The Municipal Government Act requires a written decision within 30 days and gives the clerk an additional 7 days to issue a decision. We will make every effort to meet or beat those requirements, and the clerk will forward our decision to you at our earliest opportunity. And with that, I thank everybody for your participation today.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye. Have a good day.